Thank you for listening, subscribing, and reviewing DIY for Business. It's Russ and Greg with you. Greg, how's it going?
Well, I'm with you, so it's going wonderfully.
Yes, it is. It's like so we obviously record these in advance, and we're recording this a couple of weeks in advance. I'm saying that because I don't know what the weather's going to be like, but today is absolutely beautiful here, and I'm going
Gorgeous,
to I'm going to a baseball game. So how
right?
bad can today be, right? Like we've got a couple of podcast interviews and then go to a baseball game. Life is
In the
good.
in the beautiful city of San Francisco,
Exactly. Exactly.
and one of the
And
nicest stadiums in Major League Baseball,
ex-
in my opinion. I've been to a
yes.
number of them, and I love, the ballpark in San Francisco.
Yes. Now, people are talking about San Francisco a lot right now, right? Like they're talking about how things are not so great in certain areas. I gotta tell you, it's still just as beautiful. There's a lot of areas that are like totally
Truly,
safe, totally fine. I feel fantastic. Like I feel completely safe, just like I did back in like the 90s there, right? Like I walked down a couple of streets and I was like, let's see, maybe not. It was fine. And I've done a bunch of walking in the city lately, and so I totally feel safe. However, what I don't feel is like I could find an open store. Like there's so many stores that are shut down, and it's
there
like
are.
it's so sad to see these
Yeah,
businesses that have closed, because of all the political issues and issues that are happening in the city, and also the fact that I'm parking, more in the downtown area and walking through the downtown. There's nobody there. Like I was on BART a couple of weeks ago. There were 3 people on BART with me.
yeah.
3. It used to be completely crowded where I couldn't get a seat. I could get a seat anywhere. And it's because so many people are doing this remote work. They're not going in. They're not commuting into the city. So now it's causing all of these businesses that used to be open to shut down because they were servicing the people that were coming in for work. And it's just so sad. Like that to me is just, you think about, each one of those was an idea, was a
It
this
was.
little baby of somebody that they wanted to get going, and now
And it
it's
was
it's shut down.
flourishing for so many years. That's the
Yeah.
thing, and until the pandemic, nobody saw the financial district of San Francisco going down 50% as far as how many people were actually working. I mean, there's
Yeah.
hi the skyline of San Francisco is absolutely beautiful, right? With
Yeah.
the Transamerica building and, there's so many
Mhm.
just gorgeous buildings on the skyline there. They're less than 50% filled right now. And all the
Jeez.
businesses, like you're saying, that really depended on all those workers, those are the ones that are unfortunately closing. It's tragedy what's happened
Yeah.
in that sense.
Yeah, it is. Well, we had the pandemic that shut the businesses down, and then you think that everything is gonna be okay afterwards or return to, I'll do the air quotes of normal, whatever that was,
Right.
the new normal or whatever, but it really it's not even close anymore. I mean, to be a business owner in a major city or anywhere at this point, resiliency is definitely a topic that is something that's on your mind right now,
Yes.
and it's on our mind. So we have Dr. Russell Thackeray joining us today. Thank you for joining us, talking resiliency with us.
Hey guys, yeah, let's talk. I'm looking forward to it. I was in San Francisco earlier this year, actually, and
Oh, really?
it
What was your
was quite
experience like in
lovely.
San Francisco when you came?
Well, I was on a cruise ship, so we came in, stayed overnight,
Okay.
and went off again. But
Okay.
it was very similar to the times I've been there before. And
Yeah.
actually, I found Seattle more depressing. I mean,
Oh, really?
the big stores have been shut down and such like. But we did a road trip in some of the southern US states earlier this year as well. And some of the places like Mobile and New Orleans and places, they were really struggling. Just businesses hadn't reopened. And
Yeah.
it just shows actually how many businesses were overtrading, how many businesses were trading above the peak, and how many businesses never, encountered a downtime. And it's really interesting,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because during a downtime is the greatest time to start a business. Because if you can cope in these times, then you can cope in the good times. And we've been on a rising trend for such a long time. I just don't think people had understood that there's, running a business is the joy of it is it goes up as well as down, as they say in financial circles.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got to be ready for everything, it seems, as a
Yeah.
business owner. And now there's so many, like with the pandemic, it felt like, what is this? Like this is so I remember sitting leading up to the pandemic, Greg and I sitting in an office together, figuring out like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Like we're trying to like, what's next? Like, how do we get through this? What do we do? Can we even be in the same room with each other right now? What is happening? It was those meetings were just so surreal.
Yeah,
that we had back
and
then. Yeah,
and you've talked on your episode before, podcast before, about mindset and such like, and there are those people who came out of the pandemic storming ahead. They saw unique opportunities. They saw opportunities for growth. They saw opportunities for pivoting. They started new businesses. They did something different, and a lot of people just sort of drew up their barricades and just said, "Well, I'm just going to ride it out." And some people fell apart. And that's the same as always, really. It's just the percentages were different and the scale of that. And of course, I think it flushed out a lot of faux entrepreneurs. There's been a sort of I think a move, particularly in your world, I think more than ours, that because I'm in the UK, I think there's been sort of this almost zeitgeist towards entrepreneurship, and everyone has to be an entrepreneur, and it's we have to be business people rather than just being content to do really, really well and get a corporate job. And I think it's flushed out those people who have been playing at it, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I'm curious to follow up on that a little bit. I've never actually heard that term before, a faux entrepreneur. Like, what do you consider a faux entrepreneur versus somebody that's serious about it? Is it just somebody that will see themselves through the tough times and keep persevering and not give up? Or tell me a little bit more about what's the mindset of a true entrepreneur versus a faux entrepreneur.
I don't think there's a difference in mindset. I think there's a difference in process and structure. And I'm always reminded of the old, is it rich dad, poor dad thing of your employed person, self-employed person, a business person, and an investor. And I've always thought those four levels were particularly interesting. And I think a lot of people thought they were running a business when all they really were was self-employed. And what they'd done is they'd exchanged dollars for hours in one direction, being employed, to dollars for hours in a different direction, actually just working for a different group of people in a different sort of way. And of course, they didn't build any capacity into a business. They were just working dollars for hours. So effectively, they were pretending to be business people, but really all they were doing was this same model as they'd done before, with, of course, even fewer benefits and just a little bit more risk without really recognizing that you have to invest in yourself and your own organization. And I think the idea of having a business is that you have something that's bigger than yourself. And I think a lot of people see a business as just having some sort of freedom and working to their passion. I'm doing my air quotes now. And we Brits are very cynical compared to you Americans. So, we hear these things coming out of America a lot. And, we tend to find the passion and enjoyment in what we're doing rather than sort of waiting for it to hit us like a shaft of enlightenment. And I think, and I think that mindset's going to change now. A lot of people have made tons of money out of the pandemic.
Sure.
And lots of people are doing really well at the moment. The delivery business in our world is a business that didn't really exist. Zoom didn't exist, this StreamYard did, but the whole business model is changing, and it's about to change again, much more radically with the onset of AI, VR, and AR. And I think actually we're looking back at COVID, the lessons are not there; they've not been learned in terms of disruptive change. And what's coming down the track of this is seriously interesting. If you're interested in the process of being in business rather than the sort of the phoniness or the stylistic side of it, and the wandering around shouting, "I'm an entrepreneur and here's my Porsche," really getting down and dirty about what it's like to run a business, because it's tough. It's it's interesting, but it's tough. There are really scary moments. I mean, there's that thing called cash flow. When you go into the bank account, you think, "Wow, whoa, this is an exciting moment." Will that invoice actually arrive?
Right.
And we've all done that, and we've all been in business, and we all sat there thinking we're, 24 hours from Tulsa, but it's also 24 hours from going upside down. And all businesses go through that. And that's where you learn. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you're giving me flashbacks of particular times of the year. Like I had the busy seasons where, so my it was a bit feast and famine, like there were times where it was just like, so I had to make sure that everything was leveled out so I could get through the famine to get to the next feast. And it was just it was scary sometimes. And you mentioned,
but Russ, you've hit the nail on the head there. I thought that's a really interesting comment you just made there. I remember talking to a consultancy owner of mine, and I was working in a small organization at the time, turning over about 400K. And, when we were marketing, we weren't delivering. And when we were delivering, we weren't marketing. Most of the time, we were marketing because we didn't have any revenue. When we had the revenue, we were too busy thinking, how do we deliver it to do the revenue? And it was this huge boom and bust thing. And I talked to a friend of mine who was turning over about 2 million. He said, my biggest problem is boom and bust. Whenever we're marketing, we're not delivering. When we're delivering, we're not marketing. And he moved on to an organization turning over 70 million. And we just sat in an airport lounge one day on the way over to Dubai. And we said it's exactly the same. And all business models are sort of similar in that regard, aren't they? So Russ, how did you cope with it?
What I did was when I had the money, I marketed. I mean, it was like when money was coming in, I was like, well, money's not going to, I need to turn this into more. I need to turn this into something else. So I was always concerned about and always thinking about 6 months from now, more than I was thinking about today. And then once I had enough, income and whatnot to now prepare for 12 months from now, how do I prepare for next year? What do I do with the money that I'm going to make during the next feast? Like, how do I plan that out? So I sort of just looked at it more as a challenge of what do I do in the next feast or the next famine, and just keep it going from there.
I think that's so smart because there's so many instances, in history of business that companies just kind of rest on their laurels and say it's always going to be good. There's never going to be, a black swan type of a situation like a pandemic or an economic crash or any of those types of things. Things are always going to be good. We're always going to be on top. We're always going to be making money. And then when something kind of goes awry, they're not ready for it. And they weren't prepared like you were, Russ. I think that's extremely smart.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. I mean, it almost felt like I look at my my wife's grandparents, right? And they were Depression era kids, essentially, right? That grew up with that, and they always wanted to keep everything. They were always afraid that something was going to go away. Like they were always afraid of, like he had basically like an Ace Hardware in his garage when he was running an apartment building. Like he would keep everything and buy stuff when it was really cheap, or people would give him stuff and he would utilize that. I sort of had that mentality of like, is it always going to be this way? No. So I need to prepare for when it's not this way. However, it does a bit to you. It takes a bit on, like, emotionally and mentally on you to always be thinking about like, well, this could turn bad. This like I'm a positive person, but I'm preparing for the bad thing. Like that's one of those things that I'm not sure if somebody said, how do you prepare emotionally and mentally to run a business? I don't know if I could completely answer that question. Russell, maybe that's a question for you. How do you prepare emotionally and mentally to run a business?
But it's really interesting. I mean, I'm a business psychologist, so I've worked in corporate roles. I've been CEO. I've worked in my own resilience business. I've run a very successful resilience podcast. I've written books and all those sorts of different things. And people don't look at the fundamentals of business. Very few people understand economics. Very few people understand statistics and analytics. It's really quite interesting. And one of the key skills in running any business is the business of hedging, which is actually putting money aside away from the future. And it's all you did, Russ, which is you hedged. And all the hedging is thinking about what you're going to spend today. But the problem is that for lots of people, when they get a lot of money in, what they do is they spend it rather than investing it. And then the difference is, what's the ROI that you're going to get from spending any money? So what people sometimes do is they'll invest in staff, but they'll invest in people that don't give you an ROI. They'll invest in infrastructure, again, that doesn't improve process. So it doesn't affect your ROI. It's just cost. I've just gone to an organization at the moment, and to turn it around. And what I've discovered straight away is they've been spending money on IT. That £10,000 bill for IT. This is a tiny charity. This is 10% of their revenue. 10% of their revenue spent on an IT system.
Going to IT.
IT, information technology, and the sunk cost bias is we can't throw it away because we spent all this money on it. And we say, hang on a minute, but is it delivering? No. So, but why throw it away? But we spent all this money in it. Yeah, but it's not delivering, is it? No. Well, then throw it away. But we spent all this, and you get into the circular sunk cost bias.
Yeah, that's
where
just throwing
actually
bad money
people-
after bad money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to hedge, and we have to be ruthless in terms of ROI. How many business owners that get a big payday and rush out and buy a car? I mean, we don't need to buy cars anymore because they're not statusy in that way. We'll find people who are buying legacy, huge pieces of IT equipment. Why would you have that? Why would you not be buying, nimble digital solutions? It's quite fascinating how business owners on the whole, when you go and sit down with them, and I do as a coach, and I'll say, why have you made that acquisition? What's the ROI? What's the projected ROI in that spend? And they very rarely have an idea. And of course, once you work it out with them, they're saying, well, why I shouldn't be spending that money, should I? Well, the answer is obvious. Of course you shouldn't. But what do I spend all this money on? Well, which will give you the biggest return? Which will allow you to have capacity and therefore allow you to do what Russ was saying, which was to hedge for the future. How much do you put away? How much do you put behind you? How much do you invest so you can't get your paws on it? I mean, that's one of the things with business owners. Often we're quite excited about the idea of investing, so we don't put money away. We don't put it aside. So, you can put it aside and still invest. And but you can keep investing in your business. And it's interesting because you grow to such a size where sometimes an organization, it goes through that sigmoid curve that Peter Drucker used to talk about. And you go from being entrepreneurial to being afraid. So your business is about, how do I avoid the fear? How do I mitigate the risk, rather than thinking, how do I maximize and exploit the opportunities? And once that mindset is set into your business, you're already operating as a suboptimal entrepreneur. You're already not thinking, how do I bring in the next person to grow my business? You're also already thinking about, something that really doesn't matter at all. I mean, how many business owners have you met who obsess about their website, for goodness sake? I mean, it's pathetic. In this day and age, or you'll see them all the time. You can always spot the people who are wasting their time because they're on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'd just love to say how much I've just got this amazing referral for my client. If you were that busy, you wouldn't be doing that. You'd actually be too busy to do that. And I find I haven't got time to shout and scream about how wonderful my clients are, because I'm too busy working. And I know lots of people who are like that. And maybe there should be more sizzle as well as the steak. And I get that. But I think this idea of being really savvy about where you put your money is how you build capacity in your own organization. I mean, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. And I think you brought up something that also makes a lot of sense, is some people are just very fearful. And they're, they're worried about making a mistake that's going to cost them something down the road. And you understanding, personalities and mentalities, are you finding successful business owners have a certain makeup of, what's going on in their heads and their heart, what's the right mix that will help people be, or lends itself to be more successful in business?
It's quite interesting, actually. I'm just completing my third book at the moment. It's all about leadership and this sort of way of looking at the world, which is really important. And looking at facts and rationality rather than thoughts and rather than feelings and opinions and such like, and being grounded in the real world, developing street smarts, having an entrepreneurial mindset, having a good mentor and a good coach actually is really important. And for me, a personality type doesn't come into it. Actually, you can be highly introverted and very successful. And you can be amazingly extroverted and appalling because you're not able to build that self-awareness. You're not able to take advice. You're not able to take wise counsel and do the numbers and the analytics. Years and years ago, I remember reading a book called The Beermat Entrepreneur, which talked about how to set up a software business. And the advice in that is as true today as it was then. And it's nothing to do with personality, and it's all to do with process. And I think we think in the modern world we've got this cult of personality, and I think it's part of the modern era. that actually what matters about what a business is a set of processes run by people, not an entrepreneur. What a self-employed business is an entrepreneur just actually selling themselves and their own capabilities and no more than that. And I think actually it's one of the things you have to think about when you set your business up is what's the end game? What's the end point? What's your business for? You know, are you doing this for a lifestyle, which is great, or are you doing this because you want a payday or an exit one day? Because the way you set your business up, the way you think about it, the way you process it, the way you invest, it's totally different. And people don't see that difference. And it's a shame because actually that's the difference sometimes for some people between success and failure.
So you set up that plan in the beginning, and then you evolve as a person, your needs evolve, how you're looking at the business evolves. Let's say you're going from, okay, I want this to be my business. This is going to be my job for however long. This is what I'm going to do. This is my career. And then, you know, at a certain point you decide, well, maybe I want to do something else. Like in shifting, like how do you advise people in that shift when they're going from one goal to another, major goal like that?
I guess it depends on the goal. Can you unpack it a bit more?
Okay, well, so actually, I'll use myself as the example. So,
Sure.
My business, I was like, you know what, I could run this forever. Like this could be what I do. I can retire from this. And then I don't know, a decade into it, I was just like, maybe I want to make a change. Maybe I want to do something different. And I sort of had that planted in my mind. And it was sort of this thing of like, well, no, you know, I set everything up to do this for a long time. I should continue doing it. So maybe that was my mindset for a year. And then after a year, it was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, exactly. The sunk cost of it. So now do I want to just sell this thing? I do. How do I plan for that? How do I set myself up for that? And how, now that I've gone this far down the line and I want to sell the business, what do I do? Like, how do I change my frame of mind for that? How do I prepare for my next thing that I'm going to do? Plus also sell the business, run the business. Like that seems like just it and it was a difficult time for myself. Fortunately, it didn't last that long. It was only like a 3-month thing of me working through everything. But going into that and preparing myself for that was very difficult. And I think that's sort of a resilience thing too.
It is, and you know, the capacity to make decisions is affected by many things: your personal well-being, your state of mind, your sense of where you are, who you are, and also how much you care about what other people think about you, and also critically where you want to go in the future. So if the thing you're doing now, so for me, I always have criteria in the way and the things that I work at. So I have 4 quadrants in the way I think of any work. Is it fun? Is it tons of cash? Is it intellectually stimulating? Is it getting me to where I want to go? And so I run those metrics across my business on a regular sort of basis, and anything else that I do. And I talk to people that I coach about this, and people say it's not fun, it's terrible money, it's not getting me where I want to go, and it's not really intellectually challenging. And I say, well, why are you doing it then? And they say, well, because it's what I've always done. I say, okay, fair enough. So let's think about pivoting. And it's having that criteria that helps you. So they come up with a better idea and they say, is it this? And they say, yes. And then, of course, then you have to challenge the assumption that, that you've got a sort of, an excess of enthusiasm, because you look at the old thing about the dip with Seth Godin used to say, when you're on the upward trajectory with an idea, it always looks great. But you have to stress test that idea. And if you look at it and think, this is the right idea, you either morph into it, merge into it, or stop one and bash straight into it. And then once a decision is made, you have to execute really hard. And what a lot of people do is they half make the decision and they half execute, and they end up with a half-baked business. And so for me, you make a decision and you go for it. Nothing fails with good execution. And you might end up in a different direction than even your plan was in, because you might spot an opportunity to go. But if you aren't constantly if you're not constantly challenging your own self in terms of your business and its purpose and where you're going with it and the external marketplace. I'm doing a project with a firm of architects at the moment. So, they design all sorts of amazing buildings and all sorts of built infrastructure and such like. And I just sat down with them and said, you're struggling to do this, this, and this. You realize in 1 year's time, all of this will be gone because of AI. And there was mass panic and running around, screaming, yelling, throwing themselves out of windows, hiding under the tables, all that sort of stuff. The thing you get, because as a consultant, you can say all these great things. And everyone thinks you sound wise because you said a couple of letters that everybody thinks is really great. Because when no one knows anything, in the land of the blind, I think is the old phrase. So I said, well, so sit down. It could all be replaced by AI. Yes. Okay. So why are you not the people creating the AI? And it was, so pivot now. Pivot now. Because if you wait 6 months, you'll be just 6 months later, and you'll still have to make the same decision. And a lot of problems with entrepreneurs, and I think you said it, Greg, is fear, isn't it? It's they don't take the decision, so they prevaricate, they faff about, and then they end up having to make the same decision, but it's just later. And so the decisions become more extreme. And actually, you've got to sort of challenge people who are like that. They need coaches, because sometimes those coaches are the sounding board that say, why are you waiting? What, and are you actually, should you be in your own business? If you were hiring yourself, would you do that? And I've asked that question a lot of times. People often say, no, I wouldn't hire myself. It's like, well, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Well, that's the honesty you have to have with a coach. And you have to say, well, look, given that you have hired yourself, what are you going to do to develop this out of yourself? And, I think you have to have this quite ruthless executive coach sort of process in your business. And what I find is you have too many coaches talking about well-being and spirituality and mindfulness and blah, 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 blah. And very few of them actually talk about the real mechanics of making a business work. The actual joy of the difficult, dirty process that's part of making a decision. And that's the joy of it. I mean, how exciting is it to have decide, nah, I'm not that keen anymore. I fancy doing something else. Wow, that's brilliant. At least you had the self-awareness and insight to see that, rather than waiting until it becomes a crisis point and then you really hate it. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to someone recently, and this always makes me laugh. And he was doing a project for a large third-party organization, ran a training company. And I said, hey, let's sit down and talk about your business, where you go. And he said, fine. I said, where have you been? He said, just come back from holiday. I said, oh, where have you been? He said, I've been around the world. Fantastic, around the world. He said, yeah, I've got this project that I work for an organization. I hate it. I hate it so much. I loathe it. I hate turning up. I hate turning up so much that I've got to go on holiday to actually cope with how horrible this project is. I said, fantastic. Wow, fantastic. So, and I said, well, how was your holiday? It was great. And I said, well, where are you going on another one? He said, I'm going on another one soon. And he said, how can you afford it? He said, well, I've got this contract. I hate it, but I get this fantastic holiday. I said, can you hear yourself?
Right.
And sometimes that talking out loud is really useful, isn't it?
I mean, you hear that story all the time. It's like they're doing something that they hate, but they're making money. It's giving them a great lifestyle, the lifestyle they enjoy, but they hate how they're affording the lifestyle.
But don't moan about it in that case, Greg. That's the key, isn't it? You can't sit there and whinge about it, as the old BMW technique about bitching, moaning, and whinging, isn't it? You can't whinge about your own business. If you're doing something that's great money, but it's not intellectually satisfying, it is getting you somewhere you want to go, and it's not that much fun, then that's 2 out of those 4 criteria. That's okay. That's enough.
Yeah. It's kind of like, where do you prioritize? Which one of those 4 quadrants do you prioritize the most? And a lot of times it's the lifestyle. So yeah, I'll do something that I hate because it's affording me and my family a way of life.
How many times has it happened to you? This has happened to me a number of times, where a client will ring up and they'll offer me a piece of work, and I'll say, I don't want to do it. It's not intellectually satisfying. It's not fun, and it's not getting me where to go. So I'll say, I know what I'll do is I'll triple the price. And then it'll still come back and goes, yes. And you just think to yourself, why didn't I quadruple? But hey, at least you're doing that piece of work. And then, of course, what happens is when you go into doing that piece of work, you give yourself a talking to, you manage your own mindset, and you say, look, I'm going to mine this piece of work for insight. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to produce a better result. I'm going to produce a different result. I'm going to purposely set myself a learning objective at the end of this, so I'll have got something back from this. And you've got to manage yourself, because we think sometimes people, I think, when they talk about being an entrepreneur, they talk about this freedom thing. Well, we've if we don't have a boss, that's an absolutely appalling idea to have in our own mind, that we're free, because the last thing we are is free. We just have different sorts of choices.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always, and I'm sure I've said this on the show before, but it was always funny to me that people would call me like, "Oh, hey, you want to go out for lunch today? Or you want to go do this today?" Like, well, I'm working. Yeah, but you have your own business. You can work whenever you want. No, I work when the work is here. I'm working. When the like my clients are the boss. Like that's when I have to work. When the phone's ringing, I'm answering it. So yeah, it's like it's this weird thing of you think you're going to get freedom, and that's like what people generally think you're going to get, but it's sometimes not. Like,
well,
there is that work-life balance thing that you still got to deal with.
You've always got control, haven't you? And this is the difference. You always have the capacity to make a choice, which is utterly your own. So, for example, I'm going to spend some time with my wife tomorrow. We're going to go out and do some stuff that we've been meaning to do for a while. We're going to do none of it's very exciting, but it's Monday, it's a work day, and we're doing it. I'm working today. So you what? I'm working Sunday. I've worked this morning. And there you go. That's the difference we have. If we want to take some time off, we can. We don't get paid, but hey, there you go. And of course, got employees and they're out working for us. Then we're getting the margin on that, or getting the product sales coming from our processes. But ultimately, we do have that capacity to say, I'm going to make choices. I mean, I think work-life balance is one of the greatest ironies of all time. It's just
totally.
Yeah,
totally.
It's
and
such
it's
a fallacy.
Yeah, and for me, like I recognize that was a big issue for me, right? Like I could either sit on the couch and watch TV, zone out and watch the Giants game or whatever for the next 3 hours, or I could sit there with my laptop and at least get some work done, or I could go into the office and get work done, and there'll be another Giants game on tomorrow. Like those were the decisions that I was facing, and I felt like I was digging a little too, deep into the I need to work because I'm afraid of the next slow time or whatever. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of business owners out there that are, I'm not the only one, in that kind of workaholic sort of feel. Yeah. How do you talk to those people to get them to actually get more of a balance?
It's really funny because actually we all know that intellectually, psychologically, and practically, we can't multitask. And I think there's this big myth about multitasking and this idea. There's tons of evidence that says there's a form of episodic memory where you can do certain things and do a second thing, but on the whole, you can't do anything that involves some degree of rational or cognitive load. You can't do two things well. So if you're listening to the ball game and you're working at the same time, your work will be compromised. So for me, it's always been about saying, I'm going to watch we don't have ball games. We just have football, proper football, not that soccer thing that you talk
about. Right.
We could have a fight now, couldn't we? A long way away. You can't hit me this far away. But the theory goes that when we're actually focusing on one thing at a time, that's the way we optimize our time. So if you're going to watch the football, enjoy it. Do it, watch it, really thoroughly be in the moment and enjoy it. Share the screen of the television or however you consume your sports. And then when you go to work. And too many people are attempting to do many things badly. And I mean, there's tons of research that shows, when you work in the day has more of an effect than what you do. So actually, doing heavy cognitive processes first thing in the morning and more creative stuff late at night and admin and boring tasks in the mid-afternoon. And yeah, actually, if you think of the business day, it's completely wired the other way around. So you use our optimized brain to do opening emails and fixing meetings and such like. And we're trying to write big reports in the afternoon when we should be doing admin and meetings and such like. And then we're trying to use our creative time to write, boring reports in the evening. And of course, when you rethink the day, and of course, this is as entrepreneurs, we've got the choice to do this. Tomorrow, I'll be doing it all the wrong way around, but that's my choice, and I'll work that out accordingly.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating what you're saying about that, because as the world is becoming more of a distributed workforce, so many people are working from home. There's a lot of distractions, but there is that that diligence that's necessary to block time to do certain things. And as you're mentioning right now, that there are, statistics that say, people are more productive doing certain tasks at certain times. I don't think a lot of people understand that. And they're just trying to piece together the day while their kids are talking to them, or the ball game's on, or they have to cook dinner. All these things are distracting as you're working from home nowadays. But, you really need to, set a schedule in a sense to be as productive as possible.
Or not, if that's your style.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is what we have in our world, maybe yours, is we have very poor leadership management in organizations, which is why people who are working from home are commanded to come into the office, even though it's less productive, even though when we're working from home, sometimes all we're doing is patterning the work environment by just doing meeting after meeting after meeting, all of which are unproductive, all of which are leading to burnout. At the end of the day, we're doing our jobs. So we have to think innovatively about working from home and think about its purpose and how it genuinely works. And this is where organizations who have really pivoted performance. I mean, max, real 10x, 20x performance by actually thinking about how we manage and lead people differently in a distributed way. But most, the heinous leadership management crimes I see on a regular basis just are, it's pathetic. It really is. It drives me nuts. I mean, I've been doing work in this world for such a long time. This is why I've got no hair, Russ. I'm only 27 and I've got no hair. but even less.
I'm with you.
Yeah, it's because we keep ripping it out. So,
Exactly.
I must not be worrying because I got a head of hair. Is that...
Yeah.
Greg,
what's your secret, Greg?
I'm going to stand next to him. I think the message for this is, if you're running a business, you've got so many choices. Value the choice. It's not freedom; it's just choice. It's control, and it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Why wouldn't you do it? But there's lots of people who shouldn't and can't, and lots of people who mustn't either. And sometimes you have to have someone on your team who can tell you the truth, and that's why executive coaching and proper coaching has really taken off. But then there are a lot of coaches out there who are very interested in you paying their bill and just continue, because they don't tell themselves and you the truth either. So you've got to have a sort of degree of challenge in the world. And if you can't cope with that robust third-party view, then actually, how do you cope with anything else in life?
Yeah, exactly. This is fresh on my mind because we just did another podcast interview where this came up, and I want to get your take on it, of the business owners that don't listen to that advice, that are just kind of in their own head and want to do their own thing, even though you're directing them in a way that's going to 10x their business or just make their lifestyle better, whatever it is. They just don't want to listen to that advice. Instead, they're I don't know, focused on their website, or like they're focused on something else, and they're not taking the advice. What do you say to those business owners?
I say it's their choice, because they're adults, and you take your choice, you accept the consequences, and you're accountable for your choices, because that's what being an adult is. Simple as that. It's not my job to run their businesses unless they hire me to come in as a CEO. But that's it. I mean, we've forgotten that actually we're adults, and we treat people as if we're children, and we're terrified to give them feedback in case we hurt people's feelings, instead of saying, actually, we do need this degree of honesty. There's a phrase we use in England quite a lot, which is conflict is inevitable, but fighting is optional. And
I like that.
We want conflict. We want professional disagreement. We don't want name calling and being personal, but we want to have robust intellectual arguments where we can talk about different directions. But ultimately, if you're running your own business and someone comes to me and gives me a piece of advice, and I say, I don't believe you, I'm not going to do it that way. I've listened to what you've got to say. I don't agree with you. I'm going to do it my way. Hey, I'm accountable, and I take the consequences for that decision. Simple, really simple. Right. And if I get it right, I can go, ta-da, I was right. And if I get it wrong, I can go, ta-da, I was wrong. And I take the accountability and learning from that.
And that you nailed it right there. I think there was a certain point in my life where I realized, like, I'm going to fail a bunch, and that's okay. Good. I mean, when I fail, I've tried something, I've done something. At least I've done something.
Well, I
even though I've screwed it
I
up.
want to ask you a question, Russ,
Yeah.
because
What did I screw up?
No. Hey, I know the
you
answer
do.
to that. So just kidding.
How many?
I'm just giving them a hard time.
You got a book.
This is
My
therapy now.
question is like, okay, you're an adult, you're accountable. You said, hey, I'm gonna, I have my ideas. I'm gonna go down this path. It's the right path for my company, but you have employees. And when does the responsibility of, gosh, I could be going down the wrong path, and how is it going to affect my employees, the rest of these lives? How does that weigh on you, and how did you deal with that?
Pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Why?
Like the way, because I felt like, I'm impacting other people's lives, right? Like my decisions are going to impact other people's lives. However, I generally went with it. I would go with, if I felt like it was the right thing to do. And, I'm a big spreadsheet research guy. So I generally, if I'm going to go do something, I feel like it's pretty right. There were definitely wrong decisions that I made.
Did you ever get their feedback before you made a final decision?
Well, it would depend on what it was, on what I was doing. Like, but yes, I would. I would try to pull people in and see, what do you guys think? Is this the especially if it was going to impact them. I did do one thing for the event entertainment company. We added a particular type of event that we were doing, and nobody was on board. And it actually became a very successful thing for us. Like, it really worked. None of the team wanted to do it, so I had to get different people in to actually do it.
Yeah,
but it worked.
Well,
it was profitable.
Swallowing swords was, was a little dangerous for people that were untrained. So,
right. But no, you got to pull different people in if you think that's.
But there's a problem here, isn't there? Because what you're talking about is different from feedback. You're talking about consulting with people, and and of course, when you're consulting about a business issue, you should consult with someone that has a business expertise. And employees don't have a business or entrepreneurial expertise because by their very nature, they're employees. They're not in that mindset game. So what you're doing is you're consulting and saying, actually, are you okay with this if I do it? And of course, I've done this before. Like you, Russ, I work with an organization and I dragged a bunch of people and said, hey, I want to close the division down. And they said, what's going to happen to us? And said, we're all going to lose your jobs. And say, hey, that's a terrible idea. Let's not do that. I said, oh, well, that's okay. Let's not do it then. Oh, dear, we've all gone bust. It's the problem here between understanding who you consult with. And the trouble is, it's a lonely job at the top. And that's why you need external sources of help, because actually I think we do, we over consult with people who have a vested interest in us not changing sometimes.
What about so in bringing in your business, right? Like bringing in new people into your business, you bring in a marketing person, and that marketing person knows marketing better than you, because you've hired somebody that, understands that particular niche.
Yeah.
But then you make the marketing decision and override them. Don't get their feedback because you're afraid of the vested interest. Like, when you're hiring people into your company that are specialty in those areas, like, instead of marketing, let's use finance, right? Like, finance, you really do have to understand that, or you're going to have some tax implications at the end of the year. You're going to have some problems. Yeah. So in that, you sort of do have to lean in on your team because they're specialists in that area. But when do you listen to them, and when do you think that maybe there's a bias there towards what they want?
But but you see, they're still employees. So they're making decisions based on their position in the company, often with incomplete information. It's your external advisors, your non-executive directors, your external coaches that give you unsullied, pure advice and recommendations. Of course, you would sit down with your financial advisor and say, hey, I fancy you doing this, that, and the other, the financial director of your team. But then you can't say, well, hey, I want to siphon off $30,000 into a hedge fund over here. You don't say that to them, because that's the right decision for you. But it is the right decision you can talk about with your external tax advisor. So you choose what you're consulting on. Yeah, you've got someone who's an expert in marketing. You say, these are objectives. You tell me the plan. This is the plan. Well, why would a business owner be that arrogant to think they were technically more adept than the marketing person? They're not meant to be, but you should be more technically adept at being a business person. And this is the problem, I think. You often find people who are at the tops of organizations who aren't business people, because they have what we call the cult of the shareholder being in charge. And I'm working with a couple of people at the moment, the shareholders of a really large business, and they really shouldn't be running the business because they have no skills to run the business. So my immediate thing has been bring in professional people, because you're good at being a shareholder, but you're awful at running a business. And here's the proof. Let's look at your finances. And so it's about separating the cult status. Then this is for entrepreneurship. It's this myth that shareholders should always be running the business. It's madness. I mean, the very first rule when you hire a VC is usually to get rid of I think the phrase was shoot the entrepreneur. Because the founder, because the person normally who's holding it back, and that's why they're getting funding in the first place, because they've not been able to drive the message forward.
How did they take that message from you? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, they hire people like me because they want to hear an unvarnished story. They want to hear the truth, and they hire other people who won't tell them the truth. So they're just choices, aren't they? Yeah. Because actually, I have no vested interest in blowing smoke or telling someone lies to protect my own position as a coach. I tell them the truth, because actually when I work as a coach, I always say you only have a certain number of sessions and that's it. So you can't get addicted to people. It's a bit like a therapist. When you talk, one of the organizations I run is a counseling organization, and I've been talking to someone and saying, how many, so tell me about the counseling sessions. Someone said, someone's been having counseling for 4 years, 2 sessions a week. And I'm saying, well, that's ethically, morally, practically, and all sorts of just not right. Yeah. And someone has to say that, because actually we all get addicted to people, get addicted to managers. We call it the fur-lined rut in our world, where you have this cozy relationship with your people. We forget the potential, we forget their careers, and we forget our careers as entrepreneurs. And then suddenly we'll look up one day, and then there's this piece of AI doing that all work for us around the corner, and we suddenly got no cash left, because we were enjoying the fruits of being a business person and swanning around and having a lovely time playing ping pong or whatever it is people play these days in the offices.
Pickleball. They somehow do that in the office.
That again. I've got this image literally of 2 people with bats and a pickle. That's all I'm thinking, like a real pickle. I'm thinking, how's that pickle keep it shake?
Yeah, right before we started recording here, we were chatting about Greg's pickleball podcast, the Third Shot podcast that I get to be on too. So it's I'm like a third of the not all the way in there, but
you get 2.
You're all the way in, Greg.
Yeah, you get 2 of the 3 shots, with us.
Exactly.
Luckily, the third shot is our best shot.
I'm always ready. I'm always ready to jump in and play.
Wow, that's brilliant. Do you do paddleboarding as well, just out of interest? Because I just wonder if you've got all the new trendy sports going on in your
that's true. I guess we should. Well,
we should
start a podcast for that, Greg. Let's get that going.
All right.
Any sport with a board.
I like it. Let's make it happen.
All right.
Tomorrow. All right. So Russell, okay, we'll do it. I'm down. We'll set that up. Russell, thank you so much for joining us. I want, if people wanted to pull you and get advice from you or learn more from you, you've got a podcast, and also they can reach out to you for some help. How do they do so?
A couple of ways. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Russell Thackeray. Secondly, my organization is called QED. So the website is QEDOD.com. And there's a bunch of extras and free downloads and all sorts of bits and pieces. QEDOD.com/extras. And I have some books as well, so you can go and have a look at those and see what you think. They're written with I would say, a degree of candor and straightforwardness, which I pride myself on. And most people that work with me say it's quite interesting to have someone to tell you the truth from time to time. So that's nice. I like that.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I love the title of your or I'm sorry, your gosh, I'm drawing a blank here.
Podcast.
Yeah, tell everybody the name of the podcast and
Well,
what you discussed.
I got a bit carried away with this because the podcast was called Resilience Unraveled. And because I'm from Britain, of course, we spell unravel correctly with 2 L's. And just saying. And but I've also written a book called Resilience Unraveled, and I've written a management book called, you're going to be surprised when I say it's called Management Unraveled. And we've written a relationship book. I'm gonna ask you what you think that relationship book's called. Relationships Unraveled.
Okay.
And a new leadership book, and that leadership book is called
Leadership Unraveled.
Leadership Unravels.
Fluidic Leadership. So I've broken the brand.
You've broken it. Okay. Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us and unraveling the topic here with us. There you go. You did it.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's been an honor.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for listening, subscribing, and reviewing DIY for Business on whatever platform you're listening on right now. Also over on YouTube. As I mentioned last episode, all of our old episodes, the whole library is over there on YouTube now. It's actually being uploaded as we speak. That's how things are rolling here. All of the information provided on this podcast is based on opinion, and you might want to consult a professional to discuss your exact business situation. Greg and I want your company to succeed, and we are happy to take your questions. We would also love to hear your suggestions for future episode. If there's something, that's like really troubling your business, you need some help, advice, whatever, tell us. We might be able to make a whole show around it. Reach out to us at DIYforbusinesspodcast.com. We also love talking to business owners. So if you're a business owner and you want to join us, talk about your business, talk about your experiences, we'd love to do that as well. And you can reach out on the website. We thank you again for listening and subscribing to DIY for Business, where you are not alone.